Okay, members, it's just gone 1 minute past 4 o'clock for this special meeting of council. I'm going to pass to Claire McFarlane to take us through the notice and summons of meeting and attendance and apologies. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Members, you are hereby summoned to attend the special meeting of Council, which will be a hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the Council Chamber, Guildhall, on Monday the 19th of December 2022 at 4 p.m. So just in attendance, Alderman Bresland. Alderman Devaney.
Here, Carol.
Alderman Guy. Alderman Hussey.
In the chamber, thank you.
Alderman Kerrigan. Alderman McCready. Alderman McMorris.
Here, Karen.
Alderman Thompson.
An apology, Karen.
Alderman Wark.
No.
Councillor Jason Barr.
No.
Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Carr.
No.
Councillor Cusack.
Online, Karen.
Councillor Dobbins.
No.
Councillor Donnelly.
No.
Councillor Doyle.
Here.
Councillor Duffy.
Sure.
Councillor Edwards.
No.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Ferguson.
No.
Councillor Duffy.
And Shaw.
Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Harkin.
Apologies.
Councillor Heaney. Councillor Jackson.
And Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Kelly.
And Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Logue.
And Shaw.
Councillor McGinley.
And Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Maguire. Councillor McHugh.
Shaw.
Councillor McKinney.
No.
Councillor Minnie.
Here.
Councillor Norris.
Here.
Councillor O'Neill.
Here.
Councillor Riley.
Here, Karen.
Councillor Sonoya Barr. And Councillor Tierney.
Here, Karen.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Karen. Just read the broadcasting statement now. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council's privacy notice can be found on the Council website. Okay, thank you. And just in terms of members of interest or declarations of interest, I see the people are putting them in the chat box already. So I just would like to declare that I am a member of Unison. And if anyone else wishes to make any declaration of interest, please put it in the chat box. Thank you, Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no access to the chat box, but just to declare an interest, as my wife's a nurse and a member of the RCN. Thank you.
Alderman Hussey.
Similar declaration, 3 generations of my family have been involved in nursing. Still are.
Thank you. And then the rest are in the chat box, so that's fantastic. Just moving on then to chairperson's business. And I have no issues for chairperson's business. I was contacted today, but it was outside of the time frame for being contacted for chairperson's business, so I have declined to take it. I'm going to concentrate on the business today. There was one other issue, and that was in terms of Councillor Alex Duffy, who has joined the team. We're going to reserve welcomes until another meeting, but just a bit of housekeeping in terms of changes to committees. So I'm going to bring Christopher in on that. Go ahead, Councillor Jackson.
Mayor, and like yourself, I don't want to detract from the important business of today's meeting. So we will reserve our comments and welcome to you, Alex, at a later meeting. But I would like to make the following changes in terms of the Council's Governance and Strategic Planning Committee. Could I replace Councillor Paul Fleming with myself, Mayor? In terms of Health and Communities, could I replace Councillor Paul Fleming with Councillor Alex Duffy? Environment and Regeneration, replace myself with Councillor Alex Duffy. The PCSP, could I replace Councillor Paul Fleming with Councillor Emma McGinley? And on the board of City of Derry Airport, can I replace Councillor Paul Fleming with Councillor Conor Heaney? And on the board of Rapid, could I replace Councillor Paul Fleming with Councillor Alex Duffy? And finally, Mayor, can I replace on the board of the Faughan Local Growth Partnership, can I replace Councillor Paul Fleming with Councillor Alex Duffy? Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson, for that, and those are noted and will be actioned, so thank you for that. So moving on to the business of the meeting, which was to receive representation from the following organisations to present to Council regarding the healthcare workers' industrial strike action. So this was a notice of, well, it was a proposal that came to Health and Communities a number of weeks ago, and we felt that it was very important that this be actioned as soon as we possibly could. We know that last week we've seen a number of days where we had strike action outside our healthcare facilities, hospital, Grantia, other healthcare facilities. So it's really important that we get a conversation with some of the people who have been involved in those actions. So we have invited 3 people here today to present to the special meeting of council. We have a Mr. Andrew Doherty from the Royal College of Nursing. We have Ms. Lorraine Harton, who is NIPSA representative. We have Mr. Andy McCain, who we will be familiar with, who is here representing Unison. So with everyone's indulgence, I will move primarily to start with Mr. Andrew Doherty from the RCN and allow him to present to the committee. Thank you.
Andrew, I think you're still on mute there.
Sorry, apologies, Council. Technical difficulty on Galvin, sorry. So thank you for the opportunity to address the Council on behalf of members of the RCN in Northern Ireland and particularly the North West. Some of you here this evening may recall that you kindly invited me to speak to you in 2019 on the eve of the industrial action taken by members in support of our demands for pay parity with the rest of the UK and measures to promote safe and effective patient care. It is, I believe, now widely acknowledged that this industrial action was successful both in terms of delivering for our members and making a significant contribution to the restoration of devolved government here in Northern Ireland after a gap of some 3 years. At that time, we honestly believed our strike action would prove to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Little did we imagine that just 3 years later, nursing staff would once again be taken to the picket lines in pursuit of fair pay and against the backdrop of both political crisis and a health and social care system that, or possibly beyond, is at the point of collapse. Nor did we imagine for 1 second that we would be joined by our colleagues across the UK, or at least in England and Wales, in strike action. But here we are once again. As you will know, RCN members were balloted following the UK government's Agenda for Change pay announcement earlier this year, which has left experienced nurses some 20% off in real terms compared to 10 years ago. The RCN's Fair Pay for Nursing campaign is calling for a pay rise of 5% above inflation, measured by RPI. This would make a substantial down payment on addressing the fall in the value of nurses' pay over the last decade. But our fight is not about fair pay for the sake of fair pay, important though that is. Low pay is a key contributing factor to the severe nursing staffing shortages across the UK affecting patient safety. There are tens of thousands of nursing vacancies across the UK, and the last year, 25,000 nursing staff around the UK have left the professional register. In Northern Ireland, there are now almost 3,000 unfilled nursing posts in the HSC and a similar proportion in the nursing home sector. Let us be clear about what that means. For every 10 nurses who should be working in our hospitals and communities, one is missing. I should add that this figure is the tip of an iceberg, as it only includes posts that are being actively recruited to. When we factor in vacant posts that are not being recruited to and the high levels of sickness absence within nursing, a consequence of the pandemic and the unbearable pressures that nurses work under, it is likely that around 1/4 of our nursing workforce is missing at any one time. This is simply not sustainable and not acceptable for patients or nurses. Along with our colleagues across the UK, RCN members working in health and social care services in NI were balloted during the autumn, and the first period of strike action was scheduled across 2 days, last Thursday and tomorrow. Not one nurse wants to be in this position. We have no desire to be on the picket lines. We want to be at work, caring for our patients and the communities we serve, but we feel that once again we have been left with no option. By voting overwhelmingly and in unprecedented numbers for strike action, nurses in Northern Ireland have spoken loudly and clearly to tell our elected politicians and health service leaders that we can no longer tolerate the unacceptable and at times unsafe conditions that nursing staff are putting up with day in, day out. Our members feel that they have no choice other than to take action on behalf of patients. It is important to remember that a key part of being a nurse is to advocate on behalf of patients. Nurses are reporting that they cannot give the level of care and treatment to patients that is actually required. Not only is this position unfair, but it does not make financial sense. In 2021, independent research showed the economic benefits of paying nurses more. For example, if the government gave nursing a 10% pay rise, the government would get back 81% of what this would cost them. Part of this 81% saving would result from more effective recruitment and the additional tax paid by staff. We also know that less than a quarter of Northern Ireland nurses say their salary is appropriate given their role and level of responsibility. More than half of Northern Ireland Irish nurses work additional hours at least once a week. Almost half do so for no pay. A fair pay award would also help to boost the local economy. The nurses that I know do not choose to invest their money in hedge funds and overseas property speculation. They tend to spend what money they do have in local shops with local businesses to try and meet their own needs. Nobody goes into nursing for the money. We are not asking for the earth, but we do feel that we should be at least be able to pay for our essential bills and not have to worry about where the next meal is coming from. The most worrying aspect of the position we find ourselves in is the impact on the retention of an already depleted workforce. Less than a third of Northern Irish nurses say they are thinking of leaving their current job. Of those who are thinking of leaving, almost 3/4 say it is because they feel undervalued. More than half say it's because levels of pay are too low, and 3/4 of Northern Irish nurses have gone to work over the last year when they should have taken sick leave. A recent survey amongst our members found that 83% said staffing levels on their last shift were not sufficient to meet the needs of safely and effectively of patients, a 10% increase from 2020. As many of you will be aware, the cost of filling gaps in the nursing workforce in Northern Ireland by deploying agency staff has doubled from around 52 million in 2018-19 to just over 110 million in 2020-21. We expect that the figure for 21-22 will be much higher again. Moves are in hand to try to curb this expenditure, but the problem will never be addressed until we are able to retain the nurses we need in our mainstream workforce. Deploying agency staff should be an added extra, but it is fast becoming the norm. And that is worrying. Excessive spending on agency staff is a classic example of the ways in which our healthcare system can be penny wise and pounds foolish. Rather than paying nurses a fair rate for the job or allowing them to access paid overtime through a regional nurse bank, our trusts spend exorbitant amounts of public money sustaining a sticking plaster solution to the workforce crisis, with the only real beneficiaries being the people who own these nursing agencies. The Department of Health estimates that overall demand for health and social care services increases by around 5 to 6% each year. This means that the nursing workforce in Northern Ireland should have grown by around 60% over the last 10 years just to keep up with demand. However, the workforce in Northern Ireland grew by just under 20% by 2012 and 2021. This compares over the same period with a 41% rise for professional and technical staff, a 27.8% rise for doctors and dentists, a 27% rise for ambulance workers, and 23% for social services staff. In some areas of practice, such as mental health nursing, the size of the workforce has essentially stagnated. In other areas, such as learning disability nursing, the number of nurses has fallen over the last decade by up to 30%. This is simply unacceptable. The crisis in nursing, like the crisis in health and social care more generally, has been many years in the making and will take many years to fix. However, I would like to try to conclude on a positive note by outlining a few ways to at least start to address these issues. Firstly, please treat our staff fairly. This means a fair pay award that will help to retain the nurses that we so desperately need in our hospitals and community settings. It also means supporting our staff, listening to what they have to say, and then acting upon it. Secondly, move forward with measures to ensure safe staffing. We need a comprehensive workforce plan that tells us how many nurses we need now and over the next 10 years to meet the needs of the people of Northern Ireland. We need to implement the safe staffing legislation that is currently at the drawing board stage, but of course, we can't do any of this without an assembly. More on this in a moment. Thirdly, look after our nursing staff. Nurses are simply exhausted and demoralised after the pandemic and years of working far beyond their capacity in a broken system. Investing in the health and well-being of our nursing workforce is essential if we are to rebuild our health and social care system and make it fit for purpose. And finally, we need strong and accountable political leadership for health and social care. Nobody is pretending that bringing back the executive and assembly will in itself solve the problems overnight, but the measures that need to be taken to start to address the crisis can't be taken without our elected politicians taking the lead. Above all, we need a multi-year budget that will facilitate transformation and sustainable change instead of living year by year with a budget that is barely able to sustain us keeping the lights on, so to speak, let alone building a health and social care system that is fit for purpose and meeting the needs of those we are all here to serve. That concludes my short presentation to Council this evening. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that the contribution has been helpful.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was a really comprehensive presentation, so I thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the next two speakers before I bring in members of council. So I'm going to go next to Lorraine Harton.
Hello, sorry, first of all, Lorraine McGuire is my other name, so it is me. I'm Lorraine Harton from NIPSA. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to represent NIPSA here at a time of immense pressures on our members in the health and social care sector. We cover members in all areas. Sorry, is my presentation, do I have to put it up or we used to be putting it up?
Just give us a second, Lorraine. I'll just check.
Because I actually have never had to share my screen before. I don't know how to do it.
There you go. Hopefully that should sort it now, Lorraine, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so I think you can move on to the next page there. So the overview, so we've recently undertaken a ballot of our members, and we cover members in all areas, but the majority of our members are in admin and clerical, social work and support workers. A recent ballot for action short of strike action and strike action delivered a staggering result in support of both. We balloted our members on fair pay, safe staffing, mileage, and also at the end I want to bring in the impact of the South West Acute Hospital. Next page, please. So at the minute we are in continuous action short of strike action. We have our members at the minute are working contracted hours of work only and keeping strictly within normal paid hours, not undertaking unpaid work, no coverage provided for vacant posts, no coverage for long-term sick or maternity leave, and they're taking all normal breaks and maintaining all health service protocols. We are doing this because it has just enough is enough at this stage. The retail price index has increased massively, as we all know, it's hitting our own pockets. But the health service workers, they're working hours beyond the hours they're getting paid for. We all know this, and really it's masking a need for more resources, more staff. So the rent and mortgage rates have risen, inflation has risen, costs on everything have risen, and pay remains below the rate of inflation. So these healthcare workers, along with many other workers in the public sector, have not received an above inflation pay rise in many years. So they've been taking a pay cut effectively for a lot of years. So rising costs equals need for rising wages. Next page, please. So safe staff, and at the moment, I suppose because we have members who are working beyond their hours, they're covering for other posts, they're covering, some of these workers are actually doing 2 and 3 times the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. The wages are too low to keep staff, and it is affecting recruitment whenever staff can actually earn more money doing banking or working in private hospitals. The health and social care staff can get higher wages out the road in Ballykelly than they can in Galvin. So there's not enough staff to safely staff each sector of our health service. It is not only the staff safety, where staff are overworked, you're talking burnout and complete exhaustion, but patient safety is an ever increasing issue too, whenever we have staff who are completely on their knees, burnt out, and they're not able to give the same dedication to the jobs roles that they have because they're having to do 3 or 4 jobs at a time. The stripping of resources is causing major staffing crisis. We need a complete injection of resources, money, staff, the support there. The staff need this urgently. Next page, please. So the mileage rate for staff, so you could be talking social workers, support workers who are maybe taking children to meet, with their visitation. They're taking them to appointments and etc. So, and then they have to take them home again after the meetings. So they get the higher mileage rate for the first 3,500 miles. Then they were getting 20p per miles. After that, Robin Swan had increased that back, I think it was September time, until the end of December now, but we have been told now that this has been extended. And while it's still only extended to 30p per mile after that, I'm sure any of you who have to fill your tank, that won't go very far at all. They're actually, I have had visits to the hospital and I've spoken to staff, and I've had staff contacting me crying because they cannot afford this anymore. They are having to pay £200 and £300 out of their own wages to cover their job, and the people who are working in these roles don't want to let down. They don't want to let down their patients, their service users. These people don't want to let anyone down, but really they can't afford to live on this anymore. They're having to eat from food banks. They're having to really tighten their belts to the fact that they can't, to the stage that they can't tighten them anymore, and it's just not going far enough. There have a lot of people have actually exceeded those 3,500 miles by June, and that is only from the 1st of April to June. We had actually raised the issue of trust cars. They had said that perhaps they could give fuel cards, but they wouldn't know how much of the fuel the staff were using for their working costs. And they had said about trust cars, they could, I think there's some kind of, they had thought that they might get some trust cars, but there was an issue around whether it would be taken onto, like perks of a job where people might have to actually claim tax on it. but that would be something we have been pushing. Mileage is just not going far enough. People are not able to afford to keep paying to do their own job. It's one thing for for people to have to pay to get to and from work, but it is another thing to pay to do your work, and that is just not. It's not feasible for these people anymore. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm sure with the ongoing issue with the SWA, Southwest Acute Hospital in Enniskillen, you will be aware of the recent suspension of emergency surgical general surgery. Sorry, suspension of emergency general surgery. That has actually happened from yesterday. They no longer have enough surgeons to run that rota. There's no emergency surgical ward. They now have gone from a ward of 23 beds to 10 trolleys. They're unable to recruit general surgeons due to the review of general surgery, and the Royal College of Surgeons cannot approve the job descriptions as they don't meet the criteria from the review. They had out a recruitment exercise to recruit 4 more consultants to cover the posts. Since they did that, another consultant actually resigned, and they they wanted to recruit 4 more. I'm sure, as you all have seen in the press, they are opening an elective hub there where they're going to try and get as much elective surgery to Southwest Acute Hospital as possible to get waiting lists down. Whilst we don't have any problem with waiting lists being brought down and people getting surgery, the issue would be the bypassing of ambulances bypassing SWA to come to Altnagalvin. Emergency cases, having to travel at least 2 hours. There was actually a statement read out at one of the staff engagement meetings that NIAS had done an exercise, and the average transfer time would be 2 hours and 55 minutes. Once the ambulance was requested, the person was put on it, and they got to hospital and booked on Altnagalvin. So if you're going there with a bust appendix or something like that, you're dead, basically. So there's always warnings on social media about Altnagalvin being under pressure. And I suppose why you're probably thinking, why am I mentioning this here? I'm mentioning this here because it has a complete knock-on effect on Altnagalvin. The fact that ambulances are sitting, we were told that there was going to be an extra resourcing for ambulance, that they would have, for ambulances from NIAS. Apparently that wasn't true. It wasn't NIAS told us, it was the medical director in Altnagalvin. But it's not actually true. And Altnagalvin has got ambulances sitting outside it. If an ambulance, how I know, my cousin is actually one of the ambulance drivers down in SWA. So he said, once you are called to a task, once you're tasked to a call, if you're blue lighting someone, you have to take them to an A&E. Now that they can't take them for emergency surgery, they have a checklist of a pro forma that they have to tick off for each person, and if that person has to may need emergency surgery, they have to be blue lighted to Altnagalvin. They will then have to be taken into the A&E department, which is already on its knees. I don't know, I just have massive concerns. I have massive concerns about the level of information we are given. I have massive concerns about the integrity of the information we are given. And I just think that there needs to be, I know Fermanagh and Omagh Council, which I cover as well, they have written to the Department of Health, and they have they have asked for a judicial review, or they've actually voted for a judicial, or to ask for one. I'm not sure if they have actually gone through and done it yet. But I think the council here, Derry City and Strabane Council, could do something similar, because it is going to affect the people in your area. And if not as many people in your area are going to be able to get onto into the emergency department because it's already booked out, there are going to be deaths here as well, and deaths anywhere aren't acceptable. So I think that really Derry City and Strabane Council could be taking a motion forward too. I'm not telling you what to do or anything, but I think it would be helpful if you could do something right to the Department of Health as well and support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine, for your presentation. And I think, what you finished up with there in terms of the SWA is really concerning. I know I've been talking to my own party colleagues in and around rural Fermanagh, and there is huge concerns there. So thank you for highlighting that again and the knock-on effects that will have in terms of this council area and Altnagelvin. I'm going to move on to Adam Kane representing Unison, and then I'll open it up to the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, aldermen, councillors, directors, and council staff. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, Mayor.
We can, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this presentation. A lot of my two colleagues, trade union colleagues, have covered a lot of the points. I want to bring it just a bit more, maybe personal. But there's no point in going over the same points again. You have heard the importance of nursing and the impact they've had on it. You have heard the mileage for the home care workers. I suppose, in my opinion, any civilized society should have two core values. They should have the value of educating our children and of caring for our sick. This needs staff to do this. And you could say that both are failing at the minute. We need hospital staff to look after people. As I say, I would like to thank the two previous speakers. I would like to say that we work closely together. I work closely with Andrew and Lorraine. I was on their picket, the RCN's picket line last week outside the Enniskillen, the Southwest Acute Hospital, and hopefully get a chance to join tomorrow. Unison, NIPSA have joined with us, and the industrial action. Well, I see the PowerPoint up here now. I'll just enter it and I'll work my way into that. I suppose the first thing I want to address is the spin that has been given around the pay uplift. The pay review body, the PRB, made a recommendation of £1,400 in April to NHS staff. Now, the industrial action that we have commenced on now was taken on the back of that pay lift. So that pay lift wasn't announced after the industrial action. The industrial action came after the insult of a £1,400, which is a 4% pay lift for a staff nurse. So it's 4%, and we all know inflation sitting at 11%. So the spin of this, nurses have been given £1,400 as only arrears that has been paid to the rest of the United Kingdom. Indeed, Scotland have got much more. Scotland have got over £2,000. And again, the £1,400 that has been spent on the media, we haven't got it. We haven't got it, or will not get it before the start of the next financial year, April. So we haven't got anything. We haven't even got our arrears, what we're owed. So I wanted to spell that myth already that people, they're getting £1,400. The £1,400 was last year's money that we haven't got yet, and I hope I've reinforced that point. On to our presentation and under Unison. My role in Unison is the branch chair of OMA and Fermanagh. And Lorraine's talked there about the Southwest Acute Hospital, and I suppose, and I see Councillor Hussey on there, and for the Derg DEA, that is very close to our hearts, and myself in Castle Derg, because obviously we have the option, we can either go, if we need treatment, to Enniskillen or to Altnagelvin. Well, we haven't got the option now because there's nothing in Enniskillen, so it's going to be Altnagelvin. But that puts pressure on Altnagelvin, and that puts pressure, more pressure on them. So it is. Unison have 26,000 members eligible for strike action in Northern Ireland. So we have, Unison is the largest healthcare union, it's the largest union in the United Kingdom, of 1.3 million members. And as I say, we have 26,000 eligible for strike action in Castledare, Castle and Northern Ireland. Sorry. So if we want to move on to the next PowerPoint there, the next wee slide, 97% of the return ballot voted for strike action. So off the return ballots, there was 97%. So that's the strength of feeling that's out there among Unison members. So, 97%. And as I say, we are the largest union in the United Kingdom. We represent a large block of the NHS. And I suppose to bring this more personal, we represent nurses, we represent support services, estate services, maintenance, and sometimes the nurses get all the media and all the focus, and of course nursing is vital, and the nurses are vital, and don't be falling out with me, Andrew, over what I'm saying. But I mean, the nurse in the hospital is only a part of the hospital. If the hospital wasn't clean, it wouldn't be open long. If the patients wasn't fed, it wouldn't last long. If the building wasn't safe, it wouldn't last long. So these are all vital part of the NHS, and they are all, and we Unison would represent a lot of them. Just to make it maybe even a wee bit more easier understood for the public, basically the people in the green polo shirts. When you go into Altnagalva the next time, you'll see people in green polo shirts, porters, domestics, catering assistants, and they are all low-paid workers. They and the minimum wage is going to 10.41 next April. I'm sure you're all aware. Now, at the minute, all these workers that you're seeing in green in Altnagalvan Hospital, to use as an example, are all being paid under that at present. They are not even being, come April, they will not be paid the minimum wage. They will be below the minimum wage. Now, I'm sure they will be brought up to the minimum wage. But I couldn't reinforce that strongly enough, that how, this is how badly paid NHS staff is. They will not even be on the minimum wage come next April. These are all local workers. The low-paid worker is generally the local worker, and you'll find that your support services staff, who we represent, your domestics, your catering, your estate services, your transport, your porters, you will find that large percent of these even will live within the city limits. So these people are people who live local and work local. So that's why it's so important to bring this into your chamber and into the council area, to reinforce that the workforce is so badly paid at present. The local, as I say, the local workers, the people and the green in Altnagalvan are the people on the low pay. They are on the low pay, and also, and I think Lorraine has touched on it earlier, over 80, or maybe Andrew, over 85% of that money spent will be going back into the local public. That'll be going back into your local shops, your local car dealers, your local restaurants, your local bars, your local hairdressers. So that is why it's so important to get this pay rise, to get this pay rise up and running. Now, we have commenced on strike action, and the PowerPoint is up here, and we have commenced action short of strike. And as the wee flyer still, if you can move it on up a wee bit, basically, the NHS is running on goodwill, and my two colleagues will reaffirm that. And the reason that we implemented action short of strike is to show how much goodwill is needed to run the health service. So our action short of strike, although not very visible to the public, is very, very effective, because there's not a nurse, and I hear Councillor Tierney saying this, his wife was a nurse there. There's not a nurse that is working over their hours. They might start at 8, but they're in at 7. They might finish at 8, but they're there to 9, doing a handover, doing a report, coming in on their days off, changing their shifts. So that we have implemented action short of strike to highlight how much the impact that is, and how much goodwill that the health service is running on. We are also have commenced strike action last Monday, last Monday we were out and it was obviously -5, but it was also very effective, and we had massive turnouts, and we had very, very good turnouts on the picket lines. So the local pay is very, very important, and Elaine actually touched on it, I suppose, just Lorraine just before she spoke there. And I went on a round just as industrial action was announced, and I've done a round with all the local parties in West Tyrone, my own area, and I met all the MPs and all the parties, and indeed the MP. And I mean, a common question they were asking me, and they all gave their support. And what can we do? And I want to finish off just and maybe the councillors are sitting there and thinking, well, yes, what you're saying is right, but what can we do? And these are only suggestions, and I suppose, and there's nobody that can't help. And if anybody's saying what's need to be done or what can be done, well, whatever needs done has to be done. Whatever needs done, because we need people who can look after the sick. We need a health service that's fit for purpose. And as Andrew has pointed out, staff are leaving the health service hand over fist. When we have a whole workforce of people in green uniform in Alton Galvin Hospital working below the minimum wage at this minute in time, there's something wrong. It's obvious that there's something wrong. So if I could suggest, again, and it's not for me to, I'm only suggesting, if I could suggest that council could support us in writing to the Secretary of State, and I mean that incorporates all councillors and the chamber there. There's also councillors there that are affiliated to parties, and the parties is affiliated to MLAs. So we can have a council writing on our behalf. We can have the councillors affiliated to parties going to their MLAs, and we can have the MLAs on the same campaign, because the health service is for everybody. The health service isn't just for health service employees or Unison or RCN or NIPSA. The health service was set up to be free at the point of need for everybody. So, I mean, I would encourage councillors, I would encourage council, I would encourage those affiliated to parties to lobby their MPs or their MLAs, and I would encourage their MLAs. You have an MP in the area as every area has, and I would encourage the parties who's affiliated to the MP to lobby him, and as I have lobbied Orla Begley and West Tyrone here, because we have a government here. We have a government that seems determined to keep the public sector pay down. We have saw private sector pay sitting at 7-8%, and public sector pay at 2%. David Cameron, way back in his wisdom, he decided, he says, we need to freeze the public sector pay until the private sector pay catches up. Well, private sector pay has far surpassed public sector pay. And as I've pointed out, when we have a whole lump of staff working below the minimum wage, or will be come April, a minimum wage of £10.41p, well, people need to sit up and pay attention. So I'm open to questions as well, and maybe that wasn't just as detailed as the previous, but a lot of the points was previously covered, and I want to make it more personal. And thank you very much, Mayor and Councillor, for giving me the opportunity to present this. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie. Much appreciated for your presentation. I have a number of people indicated to speak now, so I'll just take them in the order that I got them. So I'm going to call on Councillor Jackson to start with.
Mayor, and firstly, I'm going to declare an interest as an employee of the Western Health and Social Care Trust and a member of NIPSA. But I want to say, on behalf of Sinn Féin, I want to extend my welcome to Andrew, Lorraine, and Andy. You have outlined and expressed the views of your members better than any of us could as elected members. I know we've, as a party, have joined picket lines last week right across the north, and the views that were expressed today are the views that have been expressed by many of those that have been on the picket at sub-zero temperatures, demanding safe staffing and a fair pay increase. And I think it's only right to point out that nurses shouldn't be forced onto the streets to try and save our health service. In fact, none of our healthcare workers should have to take strike action for fair pay and safe staffing conditions. But that's the reality that we're in. I have no doubt that from this council, we will send our solidarity to all healthcare workers, and we will express our support in anything we can do to save and protect our health service. But it's disgraceful that health service staff are being out of pocket just by doing their job. And I know from our party's perspective, we stood in the last election with a clear commitment that we want to invest £1 billion in their health service. We want to deliver a multi-year budget that will give health trusts that certainty or security in terms of budgeting in a multi-year cycle. But the reality is what Lorraine has pointed out, that we haven't been, the reality is that we haven't been able to do that, and we haven't been able to do that because of one political party. But I think I would want to focus on the issues that have been raised by yourself. Lorraine had highlighted that our ambulance service is on its knees, and all the knock-on effects that's having within our hospitals. The reality is that our health service is on its knees. All of our public sector is on its knees, and it's about time that we woke up and took action and looked at a better way forward. And it was really great to hear. It was really great to hear from everybody, but I couldn't agree more, Andy. Whenever you said that whatever needs to be done has to be done, it's gone well past time where all elected representatives stood up and recognised the damage that has been done to all of our public sector, and I suppose it's most profound within our health sector. And it was alluded to that there's a government that's determined to keep our public sector down. That's something that we as a party have been challenging and raising for quite some time. The people living in this part of the world deserve better. There's no doubt about that. And we need to be doing everything that we can do to try and protect our nurses, stand up for our healthcare workers, and ensure that our public sector isn't decimated. But the Tory party have been doing this for the last decade. I've worked within the trust for almost 20 years, and it's unrecognisable from when I started to what it is now. The pressure that's on our service is something that I've never experienced before. And our children deserve better. There's no all of society deserves better. And whilst I know what we've been contacted today by a student nurse who suggested a way forward in terms of raising the tax band for healthcare workers as a way of protecting and ensuring that the take-home pay is fair. And that same principle could be applied right across the board to all the public sector workers. But the reality is that we don't have the levers of power to do that. That's a decision that's solely in the hands of Westminster. So whilst we're looking at all the problems that are facing our health service, the problems that are facing our education sector, and right across all our public sectors, it's worth reminding ourselves that there is a better way forward. There's there's a new Ireland that's within our grasp, where we can take decisions locally on how we want to value the work that's carried out by our public sector. There's discussions taking place around the potential for an All Ireland health service, which we could ship, and we could put those protections in from the outset. And I would encourage all the unions, whilst we will stand full square behind yourselves in the campaigns for safe staffing levels and fair and safe working or fair pay increases, but I would encourage the unions to get involved in the conversations in shaping a new Ireland, shaping what a health service is going to look for future generations, and where we're not at the behest of a Tory government who care little for the services here and the people here. And that's, and again, going back to the earlier point, a government that's determined to keep our public sector down. We deserve a government that invests in their public sector, recognises the value of our public sector, and places the protections of public sector pay at its core. So I would encourage the unions to get involved in the conversations that are well underway on how a new Ireland will look like, and I can give our party's firm commitment that we stand fully square behind the demands of all the unions that have presented today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. And Councillor Tierney?
Thank you, Mayor. And can I thank and welcome Andrew, Lorraine and Andy here today. And on behalf of the SDLP, congratulate the unions for the strength that they have shown in leading the workforce to stand up and show a fight for themselves and for the health service that we all so badly rely on. I think the first slide that we were shown by Andrew showed exactly where we're at. Big bold writing said understaffed, undervalued and underpaid. And that's exactly how nurses and healthcare workers feel at this particular moment in time, and how they have felt, unfortunately, for quite some time by the way that they've been treated. 3,000 unfilled nursing posts across the north. Imagine if those posts were filled, the pressure that would take off our current nurses who work through the trust. Imagine what that would do to the health service and how patients are looked after and treated within the health service. And I think it was Andy that said, no one goes into nursing for the money. And as I declared an interest at the start, my wife is a nurse, and I know many nurses that work with the trust. And I know that many of them went into the health service and went into the nursing profession because they've got a loving and caring nature, and because they want to look after people when they're at their most vulnerable. They should be paid fairly for that. They should have the right amount of colleagues with them on the ward or in the community to support them when they're doing that. And they should feel the value of that work whenever they're carrying it out. I think it's important, and I've said this every time that we've discussed industrial action by nurses and healthcare workers, that the safe staffing levels goes hand in glove for any nurse that I have spoken to. And I was, like many others, on the picket lines with nurses last week, and I intend to be back on the picket line tomorrow to support the nurses. But safe staffing levels goes hand in glove with all of this, because it's through safe staffing levels that the pressure will be lifted from our nursing staff, and that will also help other support staff as well that Andy touched on. I find it incredibly hard to believe that people are using industrial action to finish their shift on time or to take a lunch break, which many of us take for granted within our own jobs. The majority of society wouldn't put up with it, and we shouldn't expect nurses or healthcare workers to be working past their shift. When the clock strikes for many of us when we're in our jobs, we get ready and go home. Nurses have no idea what time they're going to finish their shift at. Their families have no idea what time they're going to finish their shift at. But nurses stay on. They don't stay on for the money. They stay on because they're worried and concerned about their patients and about their colleagues, and they stay on to offer support to all of us. This can be fixed. It won't be fixed overnight, but it can be fixed. And Stormont is one of the avenues that I see that it can be fixed. I wouldn't be one that would be very complimentary of Stormont at times, and it's not very often that a good idea comes out of Stormont. But having a multi-year budget to support the health service was indeed, in my opinion, one of the better ideas that Stormont had. Unfortunately, they can't do that now. The role of government in all of this, I believe, is to help trusts across the north to rebuild the health service, not to add pressure on them. And that's what we're seeing around the plans for SWA. We will see here at Altnagelvin the pressures facing staff there. The mileage contribution was discussed, Mayor, and 3,500 miles, you're on a higher rate. After that, you go down to 30 pence per mile up until the end of this month. I would like to let the Department for Health know that the price of fuel does not go down whenever you buy £3,500 worth, or miles worth, sorry. It stays the same price. Therefore, nurses and anyone who's using their vehicle for their job should be paid the same. The mileage contribution is to cover your fuel and the wear and tear of your car. Even at the higher rate now, it's not covering the price of the fuel. And many nurses are taking that money out of their own salary to try and cover the cost. Andy made a very good point whenever he said, whatever needs to be done whenever we were asking how we could help. And what needs to be done now is the DUP need to get back to work. This has gone beyond a joke. Nurses last week were standing in freezing cold temperatures, striking for fair pay and safe staffing levels. This has got to stop. The DUP must get back to work, must allow for a health minister to be put in place to support nursing staff and support staff. I've spoken to many people across society and across Derry, and I have to say that despite what the media are saying, the nurses and the healthcare workers have the full support of their patients, because their patients are the people who see the pressure that they're under. Madam Mayor, we turn to nurses and healthcare staff when we are at our lowest, when we are at our most vulnerable, when we're sick, when we need an operation, or unfortunately, when a family member is dying. Those nurses and healthcare staff are there for us. It's time that we were there for them. On behalf of the SDLP, I send our full support to all staff taking part in industrial action. And I plead with the DUP, get back to work and allow us to fix this problem, rebuild the health service, and get society back up and running. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Neil, online, hope your internet's back working.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's working, but I'll keep the camera off just in case. Yeah, I just want to firstly thank Andrew, Lorraine and Andy for your presentations. I think it's really important that we hear your voices here in the council, and I just want to say commend the action that your unions are taking, fighting back, enabling members to fight back in the face of the cost of living crisis. And I think you've all described the situation well. Obviously I've put on the declaration of interest that I'm an employee of the Western Health and Social Care Trust, and the situation and the reality on the ground is not good, for workers both in work and also trying to survive outside of work because of the mediocre pay that health and social care workers are getting. I think a word needs to be said of the stress of workers, because the health service was on its knees before COVID even hit, and that's just added further stress to the service, but also to workers themselves, and the cost of that stress on the health and the well-being of workers. I think we're still waiting to see the full out workings of that, but a lot of workers have taken action on those stresses by actually leaving employment, whether that's leaving employment altogether in the health and social care service, or whether that's working for agencies where they then have more control over the hours that they work, because in a way, working for the health and social care service, you do not feel that you have that control. And we've seen record numbers of staff leaving, unfortunately, over the last year. Which is such a loss, because a lot of these staff are senior members of staff who more junior members of staff rely on so much for their development, and for safety onwards. And I think there have been points made very well around workforce planning as well, where Andrew, I think it was, had described the increased need for certain health and social care services that have not been matched by increased places at universities, for nurses, for allied health professionals, and for medical staff. And so like that's not going to be a quick fix. We're going to need to plug the workforce gap, but that's going to take maybe 5-10 years to fully see out workings of that. But poor decisions were made in terms of workforce planning that need to be made better. I think like people have left because, yeah, Lorraine had said you get more money in the private hospitals in Ballykelly, but also we're unique in that we're a border region, and I know that there's 2 staff that I work with in the last week who've been offered better paid jobs in Donegal. They don't want to leave the health and social care service here, but they would be mad not to, given the salaries that they've been offered just over the border, and that's a situation that exists, I think, uniquely here in the Western Trust. I think, Andy, you made the point well about how band twos are now going to be below the minimum wage come April. And, this happened, like the stagnation in the health and social care workers' wages is seen by the fact that band ones have totally disappeared because their wages did not keep up with inflation. And so band ones had to all be moved up to band twos because they would have been paid below the minimum wage. And the reason that health and social care workers are underpaid is because the government does not value care. They don't value the care work, which is primarily done by women in society. I think it's 3/4 of the health and social care workforce in the north is made up of women, and it has been a political decision to underfund the NHS. And one of the reasons for this is the devaluation of care, but also to allow privatisation. And although that's been like a slower process here in the north, we've seen that very much so in social care, where we have most of our social domiciliary care providers, and care homes are now privatised, and we can see that system is not working well for workers or for patients. And I think strike action is often a last resort, but it's become our only resort at the moment. And the public support for the strike action has been excellent. Despite you know, minority voices in the media who I think they found it hard to find. And we've seen not just with health and social care worker strikes, but strikes within the postal workers, within BT workers, even our own council. And we've seen many groups of workers have won real cost of living pay raises and improved conditions by taking strike action. And I think it's crucial now, because this fight will not be won easily. And I think, as our speakers have highlighted, this fight is not just about increased wages, but it's also about the future of the health and social care service. It's about retaining staff and attracting staff and ensuring that there is safe staffing. But crucial now is building solidarity for strikes and organising coordinated, united action. And I suppose that's a question for our speakers here today, is around that coordinated, united action. And in the new year, kind of, are there plans to work together even more? Because I know on the ground in the Western Trust, we have worked very well in terms of coordinated action in the build up to the strike actions. And I think it's important that we're on the same fight. It's important that we speak with that one voice. to really make our demands clear. And we need to have that united message to government to call for the end of attacks on trade unions. Like, the only response that we've seen from the Tories to this strike action is like whispers that they're going to clamp down on trade union activity, which is not which is not at all what we want. We need more powers to trade unions and more freedoms. And I think we need to look at coordinated strike action, not just for the Health and Social Care Trust, but also across the board, and looking at a general strike, because that is what all-out action will look like if we're to win the demands for above inflation pay increases that we so truly deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Andrew, Lorraine and Andy. A couple of things. Can I thank Andy for reminding this chamber that the impact on the Southwest Acute Hospital does impact. It's not on a knock-on effect on this council area. It impacts on the area south of Strabane that I represent and others represent. So there is a direct impact, and there's no need for any apology from anyone to bring SWA into the equation. Undoubtedly, we are facing, and have been for decades, a severely deteriorating National Health Service. And it's now at the point, it's at the tipping point of collapse. And at present, we have nurses and other staff within the health service fighting to retain that service. And it's incumbent on the rest of us to realise that we cannot afford for the current situation to be terminal. Because let's face it, that's what's around the corner, unless action is taken. Andy has also highlighted the totally interdependence of all within the health service, be that a consultant or be that a cleaner or be that a nurse. It's a combined service where each and every element of that service is as vital as any other. Councillor Jackson mentioned the multi-year budgetary scenario, and I know that when he was in office, Minister Swan was very keen that that should be enacted. We reached a situation where he was denied that opportunity to bring forward that, and indeed the acceptance within many that we need to have a roadmap to save the NHS. That needs to be brought forward. The reasons as to why that cannot be done within Stormont at the moment, I'm not going to go into. But we've seen today where the Secretary of State and our British government have been able to extradite a payment. Therefore, why can't they take on board and deal with the health situation that exists, not alone in Northern Ireland, but throughout our United Kingdom? The whole issues of pay, retention of staff, recruitment, staff shortages, patient safety, and the integrity of the National Health Service. They're all interrelated. Some may see this as a strike for better pay. Fair enough. But it's also a strike to seek retention of excellent staff that are there. It's to encourage recruitment into the workforce. Andy, you'll be well aware of my younger brother who did retire 7 years ago. He's now 72 and he's still working as a male nurse, and Andy's aware of that situation. And he's a valued member of the team there. But he's there because there's nobody else to take his place. That whole staff scenario is totally wrong. So pay may be in there, but the whole impact throughout the entire system cannot be avoided. The mileage scenario, I totally agree, and particularly when you've taken on board health service staff who are working in a large rural area. They're not heading round the corner to a street out of the Royal Victoria Hospital or whatever. They're going from SWA to all parts of Fermanagh, all parts of Tyrone. So a 3,500 mile cap before, whereby the mileage allowance drops is wrong. I think it was Andrew who brought on board the point of bringing on staff, which would actually not be the full amount, but the 81% that would be saved, highlights the false economy that exists by not having proper pay and indeed conditions for all of our staff within the NHS. On behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party, I can assure all of the unions and all of those who are not in unions who work within the National Health Service, they have our support. We would love to see multi-year budgeting. It's necessary not just in the health service, but in other spheres of governance. But be assured of the support. And I suppose a question, what would the unions see as short-term to avoid an oncoming disaster and eventually long-term solution? So what's the short-term whereby we can turn the corner at this point in time to enable the health service to settle down, hopefully with a new administration, a new minister, and work out the long-term roadmap to restoring a jewel in the crown of the United Kingdom, the National Health Service, to what it should be. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. I have two further speakers, and then I will open it back to the unions to see if they have any comments. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And on behalf of the DUP, I welcome Andrew, Lorraine and Andy here and welcome their presentation. And our party is very, very supportive in fair pay and safe environment condition for the workers, our health service. And look, I've been on record before, Mayor, raising the issue and around agency staff. And it's something that has always worried me for a long time now, and the cost that is costing the health service, £100 million, I think I heard mentioned earlier on, for a year, and we don't know what this year is. And I believe, Mayor, look, there needs to be more resources put in there to encourage recruitment of new nurses and doctors, with the right pay and the right working conditions. I think Andy has very, very clearly stated that not only the nurses are valued, it's all the workers, should it be the cleaner, right through to the surgeon, right through to those who deliver the teas. It's the whole lot of them make that package in there, and they have to be very, very much valued. In around, Mayor, the multi-year budget, I do believe that is something that should have happened a decade or a decade and a half ago, or even longer, because everyone needs to know what their budget is to plan clearly for the year ahead. And as previous speakers have said, it's not an unknown story to know that the health crisis has been in crisis for well over a decade, or even maybe two now at the moment. And around the mileage contribution, I do understand the sentiments in that in there. And look, the mileage is not covering the cost of taking those carers, whatever they may be, to carry out their work. And I do that there. I do believe that needs to be addressed. Just back to the comments in around Stormont, and I don't think the calls for Stormont should be up and running, the DUP to get back to work. If Stormont was up and running today, I can assure you this issue would still be unaddressed, because at the end of the day, where would Stormont find the funding to support the pay rise? And we all know there is a cake and it's a certain size. And where do we take the funding from? Do we take it from an education system that is faltering? Do we take it from DFI, roads where issues are faltering, or which department would, those people are saying if Stormont is up and running, my call to them is where would we get the funding to do it? And I think that's very, very vital. And I do believe this funding has to come from Westminster. And I think it was Alderman Hussey clearly, quite rightly said that the Secretary of State and them are working on the £600 now. And those are issues that need to be dealt with. In around Sinn Féin, and around, the All Ireland healthcare, I have relatives who live in the Republic of Ireland.
And I had a relative who had to pay out in excess of £20,000 for an operation to relieve his pain and suffering. And that is in the Republic of Ireland. And I do believe that is wrong. Yes, he would had to probably waited years to have the operation done, but he was in the lucky position that the person, was able to get the £20,000 and relieve that pain and suffering. So all is not well in the new Ireland that Sinn Féin talk about, and I don't want to dwell much further, but fully supportive of the fair pay raise and the safe environment, and the budgets should be annually on the year before. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. I must introduce you to our health policy at some point. Councillor Sonoy Barr.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Andy, Andrew, and Lorraine, for taking the time to speak to us today. You have provided a very comprehensive overview of the current situation in our health service, and Councillor Tierney has spoken on behalf of the SDLP party. But I just thought I should maybe just weigh in by expressing my solidarity to you and all the nurses across the North. I think it's quite sad that nurses who are lifesavers are forced to take strike action. And I wanted to say how sorry I am that you have been put in such a situation. I have a lot of friends and colleagues and who are nurses, so I have an understanding of what they are going through right now. Well, I understand that pay is not the only problem, and nurses are currently taking a real pay cut. But coupled with other challenges like overcrowding, long waiting lists, the government is also struggling now to recruit nurses. The health service is struggling to attract young people to get to the nursing profession. And those who are already qualified are leaving the profession or contemplating to leave. Only this morning, I had 3 nurses in my office, and we were talking, and they all told me they're transferring to Scotland end of this month. And they all said they love working here. They love living in Derry. But the circumstances, the poor working conditions, the pressures they are going through at the moment, they just can't cope with it anymore. And I also know doctors who have left Derry throughout this year and last year. They have all gone to England to go and work in England or Scotland or Wales. I also had another doctor this morning in my office coming to say goodbye because they are leaving on the 27th, going to Wales to work. So we are losing professionals who are already there, who are going to save our lives because of the poor conditions that they are working on, because of the pay that they are getting. It's a pay cut. And I wanted to ask Andrew, nurses in Scotland earn more than nurses in Northern Ireland, but they're doing the same job like every other nurse across the UK. And I wonder if you're asking for pay parity with the likes of Scotland so that our nurses can feel valued and appreciated and they can be happy when they go to work. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you, Councillor Sonoy Barr. Councillor Donnelly.
Good Chair. Chair, it's I'd like to thank the trade unionists here and good to see you back again, Andy. Look, it's all very just I don't know how to describe it, but it's very a bit depressing. And what makes this, when you see people trying to score points with orange and green, it just adds to that sense of despair. There's almost this attitude of we can get Stormont back up and running, that everything will be okay. Couldn't be further from the truth. And if there's anybody that thinks that everything is okay in the Free State, well, it's not, and it's not fit for purpose. But I do agree that it makes sense to have an all Ireland health service. I've stood with health workers in freezing cold, and I've spoke to them. I've spoke to them in other circumstances, and these workers they're demoralised and they feel very unappreciated. A lot of them want out. I can personally testify to that, And, but again, I just like to express solidarity with the workers and just to say to the trade unionists, there's a huge battle here. And, and in fact, that, I heard him saying about, the lies and that. And there's no saying that the first casualty of war is truth. And this is a war. This is a war on the health service. And I think it's going to take a unified approach to try and bring this around again. So it's just solidarity with trade unions and those in strike. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. And last speaker before I bring back in the unions is Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor, and I really appreciate the presentations that we've got from the three representatives here. But I have to agree with the gist of what Gary has said in his comments there, because it's these problems weren't manufactured in the last year. I used to work alongside senior doctors, and I remember constantly, just as we are used to in council at times, almost sending letters to the Department of Health outlining problems that are now huge problems. They come back to us to say, no problem, we've got it, we're on it. The mountains of medical workforce planning reports that have sat on shelves, the service reconfiguration plans that have sat on shelves, and these have sat on shelves whilst Stormont have been up. So this idea that the DUP will go back to work tomorrow and everything will be fine is nonsense, because some of the parties that are standing over outside hospitals, getting their photos taken with striking workers, are the ones who are behind partly this crisis, and that's a fact. It's all right. We can sit here and blame the DUP, and they have a blame to be taken, and the Tory government also have to take blame. But so do some of the parties who have been in charge of the health service here for the last 20 years. So, this idea that, it actually got that bad. I've been sick over the last week and a half, but I got a message from a nurse yesterday who said, Emmett, I really had to bite my tongue because there were MLAs standing over with us at a picket line. These are the people who should be back at work. These are the people who are getting paid more than I am to sit in their office. So this idea that let's all band together and this is we're all going to support striking workers, it's fine in practice, but you see whenever it comes actually down to it, and it was manifested in this council only recently, whenever nobody wanted to talk about MLA pay. If we are going to stand in solidarity, let's do that. And of course, for me, that doesn't apply to the previous speakers, because I recognise that people do genuinely care. I know a lot of healthcare workers who have been saying the same thing for the last 15 years. And, we talk about them when it comes to elections and it comes to pressure points like where we are now. People say, well, we'll just invest money in it. It's not about just money. It's systemic. It's the fact that people can't take breaks. It's the fact that there's a massive management culture in health and social care in the north. It's the fact that realistically, the only reason why MLAs were even back in Stormont before this recent crash, when it was crashed the last time, is because health and social care workers demanded it. So, it really does disturb me at times when we get to the point where we have professionals like the three presentations we've just had, and we hear that everything will be grand when Stormont goes back. I'm sure that Andy and the rest of the team from the other unions were saying the exact same thing. The health ministers who were elected by people here, not 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But they try and make out that it's going to be all fine, and when the DUP get back to work, if they ever do, then it'll all be fixed. This is something that has been on the desks of ministers and MLAs and parties in the north for now decades, and none of them wanted to sort it out. One meeting in particular I went to a number of years ago when I did work with the BMA. I'll never forget it. It was about medical workforce planning. And the lady in the Department of Health who was in charge of medical workforce planning was a bit late for the meeting. And I've said this before in this council, because she only actually flew in from England 3 days a week. Now that's when there was a minister. So now all of a sudden saying that Stormont's going to fix everything is a nonsense. Absolute solidarity with the workers, because I see what some of them are doing. I have family members who are nurses who are, and I noticed the slide, literally paying to go to work because they value their patients so much. But let's get away from this twaddle of orange and green, because orange and green have been in charge one way or the other for the last 20 years and have got us here. It's not just been London, and it's not just been inflation and the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Thank you to all the speakers. I'm going to go back to our union presenters. Here, there was a number of issues. Well, everybody spoke in support of yourselves and the action that has been taken, but there was a number of questions that were posed. So I leave that up to yourselves how you want to deal with those. But the first was probably from Councillor Neil, and that was maybe around how people plan to work together in the new year, how the unions plan to work together. We then had comments from Alderman Hussey around what the unions see as maybe a short-term solution, or what is then their long-term solution and what's their long-term roadmap. And then from Councillor Sonoy Barr in terms of nursing in Scotland and pay parity. So I don't know who wishes to come on first. Andy, Andrew, or Lorraine?
I'm happy if other two's happy
Go ahead, Andy.
to respond. What was the first one? Sorry, Sandra, I missed it. The first question was from...
The first question seemed to come from Councillor Neil, and it was in terms of the unions and what the plans are for the new year and how the unions might work together.
Yeah, okay. Well, from Unison perspective, I would like and have lobbied my head of bargaining and Speed for all the unions to work together on a united front. I feel we're stronger together. So Unison is more than ready to reach out to all the other unions and to have a united approach towards this. And I have to say I agree with Councillor O'Neill there, because I also joined the communication workers unions, picket lines, the postal staff. I think that there is a strong argument for all the trade unions to join up. Even the teaching unions are balloting. TransLink aren't happy, so the real, although I support the rail strike, it doesn't affect us that much over here. But I think there's a valid argument for the unions, and I certainly hope and have lobbied for all the unions to go together in Northern Ireland to after Christmas. I sit on the District Election Committee for Unison at a regional level, and as I say, hopefully we will get a joined up approach towards it. And as I say, and I've said earlier, we work closely together. I've been on Andrew's picket line last Thursday, and I hope to be on the one tomorrow again. So we do work together. But I think there is an argument for all the unions certainly working together from a unionist perspective. Moving on, I suppose, to Councillor Hussey. And I know his brother extremely well, and I've worked with him on many, many occasions. And he is a fine man for 72 years of age. So he is, as indeed as Councillor Hussey's nephew. But, it is sad. Well, I know Ronnie enjoys his work, but 72 for a 12-hour shift is a big ask. And I know for a fact that he comes in out of good wool, because the rest of us is that short-staffed. But Councillor Hussey says that, he posed two questions, the short term and the long term, I suppose. The short term answer is a decent pay raise. A decent pay raise is an inflation equivalent pay raise. So inflation's at 11%. So nurses need an inflation. Unison's ask is an inflation busting pay raise. So that's the short term things. I think it's well within the government's grasp to do it. I think it's a political decision for them not to grant the money. I think the government has loads of money. If there was a crisis anywhere else, and God forbid there is, anywhere else across the world, millions can be spent at the drop of a hat. We have saw billions spent on PPE. A lot of it that was unfit for use, and then they spent millions burning it. and incinerating it to get rid of it. So I don't accept for 1 second that the government hasn't got the money, or the country hasn't got the money to pay nurses. They have the money, but it's the political decision not to pay it. And this particular government at present seems to be up for to go toe to toe with the working folk and the working class, and they seem to want to keep them down. And it's as simple as that. You know, the long-term solution, I mean, we have heard about Stormont and the pluses and minuses. I mean, one thing that Stormont can provide is a long-term budget, and this is where I come in to address Councillor Hussey's long-term plan, because I had Councillor or Minister Swan and Oma when we were looking to get phase 2 of the new hospital completed, and when he was health minister, and he says, what I need to do this is a recurring budget. He says, I can't build a new phase of a hospital or a new addictions unit and a new mental health unit that was promised. He says, I can't do that without a recurring budget, and I believe him, and what he's saying makes sense. You know, so I mean, you know, you can't start something that you can't finish, and you can't. So we need long-term budgets. We need multi-year budgets as a long-term strategy to protect the NHS. But I think also the NHS, and I've said this to MLAs that I've been in conversation with, and they've said, what is the answer? Like, and I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but the NHS needs major reform. It absolutely needs major reform from the top down. I think it is top heavy with senior managers, it's top heavy with highly paid people, and to coin a phrase, there is far too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And that is a simple explanation for a long-term plan. Councillor Hussey, on the pay parity with Scotland, and maybe I'll let Andrew address it. It was addressed to him, but Unison certainly has asked for an inflation-busting pay raise. The Scottish pay raise, I think, has been 7. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been 7% So we would still see that short of what we're asking. But the reality of it is that we haven't been offered anything. And the reality of it is that the arrogance of the Minister for Health won't even meet to talk about pay, not even put pay on the table on agenda. So, I mean, there's extreme arrogance there, you know, extreme arrogance. And I have to go back, I suppose, and to say that, you know, when you, on the arguments, you know, the NHS is for everybody, and everybody needs it, and everybody here and this will need the NHS at some time, or their relatives will, and that is everybody's battle. And you will not see an orange or a green bed in Altnagalvin Hospital. And to add a slight humour to what is a very grey situation or dark situation, if you see RC or P on a chart on the bottom of a bed in Altnagalvin, it'll not be Roman Catholic or Protestant, it'll be Rice Krispies or porridge for breakfast. So on that note, thank you, folks, and I hope I've answered the questions that have been brought. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for that insight. Probably go to Andrew next in terms of, because there was a question that was specifically asked of yourself, Andrew. So I'll go back to you now.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I'll just run through these in order as I was scribbling them down as I went along, if you don't mind, and then I'll come to Councillor Sonoy's bar point at the end. So in terms of Councillor O'Neill's point around unions working together, so look, absolutely, we respect, you know, all unions' right to represent members in the best way that they see fit, and there is a regional trade union forum within Northern Ireland for Health and Social Care trade unions, and work and conversations are beginning there about what action looks like in the new year. And you know, like Andy, I think there is benefit in taking some kind of concerted joint action. Strength in numbers is sometimes more powerful, and I'm in Altnagalvin here tonight, trying to organise for strike tomorrow, and sometimes when that burden is shared across multiple unions, it's a wee bit easier to manage practically. So I think that seems to be a sensible thing to think about going forward if there's no resolution. Councillor Hussey asked about, you know, the immediate solution or help in some of this, and I think Andy has said it exactly. It is a pay rise, an immediate pay rise. From a nursing perspective, it takes 3 years to qualify 3 years to an undergraduate BSc in adult nursing, and then you become a nurse on the register. In practice, then it takes a further 6 to 12 months working in a clinical area to be deemed sort of clinically competent in that area. So we can't fix this shortage of nurses immediately by recruiting more student nurses and training more student nurses. We need to retain the ones that we have. And in the Western Trust, within the last 3 months, there have been 200 nurses have left in the Western Trust alone. So, you know, and the deciding factor for leaving is the lack of pay. So we need an immediate pay rise to stem that, and then we can begin to work on the longer term plans that Andy has kind of alluded to: reform of the health and social care system, implementation of the numerous reports that are sitting on shelves around the Department of Health, and beginning to address some of the long-term problems. And recurrent funding and a recurrent budget is a massive issue. I have a group of members within the Western Trust here who are employed on transformation money, and the transformation money has stopped, and those nurses are providing a life-saving service to post cardiac event patients, and their funding has stopped because there's no budget, and that's the situation we're in. Those nurses are now looking at their options, thinking, should we just go and take up employment elsewhere? So that's a massive concern. And then lastly, Councillor Sinoy Barr's point, you're right. The Scottish members of the RCN have the ballot is just closing on whether or not to accept it. But regardless of what the ballot will be in the RCN members, the other unions have voted to accept the offer in Scotland, and that is around 7.4%. Andy, somewhere around about there. You're right. It varies across different bands, and that lack of parity is a huge concern for us, because it means now that our members in one part of the UK will be earning significantly more than members doing the same job in another part of the UK, and that's a position that's unsustainable. So our senior council are looking at that message, and to reassure the councillor, our ask is for an inflation plus 5% rise, and that 7% falls way short of that anyway. But you're right that now we're out of parity, that becomes a significant issue for us, particularly being in close proximity to Scotland and having a good relationship with Scotland. We have nurses who frequently come back and forward, and I spoke to nurses just recently, like the councillor, who are now considering going to Scotland to take up employment. So that will be an option that council or RCN council will be looking at, to think about changing the ask to maybe look at that parity campaign. And just a wee point of clarity, just, you know, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Royal College of Nursing. Our members are nurses and nursing assistants, but not for 1 second do we discount the role that the other allied health professionals and support services play in our health service. The Alton Galvin Hospital, where I am now, would not function without every single member of the team working together in a collegiate way. And married to a healthcare assistant and family who have support services and port services, and you know the hospital just wouldn't function without it. I'm only speaking on behalf of our members. And there's just a wee point of clarity I wanted to pick up, because I've heard this among some of the public discourse in the media and as well. When we talk about safe staffing, we're not really talking about safe staffing conditions for our members in the wards. We're talking about the minimum number of nurses that are required to provide safe care to patients. So we're not really talking about the health and safety in that sense. We're talking about the number of nurses that are required to provide care and effective care to patients, and that is the safe staffing legislation that we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. Lorraine, just seeing if there's anything that you want to add at this point.
Thanks. Well, a lot of what I would say, you know, has been covered already. As for Councillor Neil's point about unions working together, Andrew has said there that sometimes there's strength in numbers. I would argue against that there's always strength in numbers, and that the bigger the numbers, the more strength you actually have. So we would definitely advocate working together with unions. And when we were out on the picket lines last Monday, you know, we were there with Unison standing side by side with us, and GMB, and then we went out to our colleagues in RCN, you know, a few days later, and we'll be back out tomorrow with them, you know, and we are continuously on action, short of strike action now, and I know that we're getting supported in that. It is vitally important that unions work together, and, you know, as Andy has said about the CW picket lines, and, you know, any picket line, you look at every aspect of our society now, everybody is on the picket line, and it shows that there is something very broken about our society nowadays. where every single aspect, my own daddy was a fireman in his day, and right from I was growing up, I've always been involved with unions through that, through my daddy being in one, and then when I started working, and it's always been so important, and it's important for us to, I suppose, educate our young people going forward about that too, so that we can have strength going forward as well. But it is so important for us all to work together and support any workers that are striking, and going forward we need the support from the other unions as well. The short term, solution would be to pay a decent wage that will encourage the many workers who have left to return. Realistic mileage that people can actually afford to go to do their work. For the parity, actually, we do have parity with England at the minute, and they were already paid the £1,400, as Andy said earlier. They were paid it in August. They won't get it here until the end of March, and by the time it's paid, workers will actually have to pay back tax and pension contributions, which might negate any rise, to be honest. So we actually, back in 2019, I know NAPSA had been looking for pay parity with Scotland back at that stage, and I wish to God now we had it, to be fair. Then another point, I just want to say, I don't think that our health service should be used as a political ping pong ball. And it is something that is very close to my heart. I think, see, back whenever I was 22, I had my life saved with a blood transfusion, and I did not stop for a second to ask where that blood was coming from, and whether that blood was from a Catholic or a Protestant or what. I just know that my life was saved, and I'm here now because of it. And I think that it's sad that if it is used that way, and it is one point, there is always going to be some sort of green and orange issue in this country, sadly, because I don't think there should be. But I think that this is one thing that we should all be fighting for together. And I'll be honest, I don't care what anybody else. And I just would like to know that we have a safe service here. We have enough people. I've had social workers an absolute sobbing with me in tears because there's supposed to be 25 in the team, and they have 5 people on. So you tell me what was safe about that? Nothing safe about that. And that is where we need the help, we need the support, and we need people, and I'm glad Andrew said, my sister's a trainee nurse, she's going to qualify this year, and don't tell anybody, but she has RCN at the minute. So, but I think it is so important that we do make the point that it is not just nurses, because I know I've heard from a couple of councillors there where they're sending nurses out freezing. There was cleaners out freezing, there was social workers out freezing, there was home care workers out freezing, there was, there was a hell of a lot of people out freezing, because I know, like the rest of you boys, I'm just glad I'm home with all my toes and fingers after last Monday, because it was something like -7 in Enniskillen. And I think it's so important that we stand with all those workers, no matter what part of the healthcare system they are, because they're all parts of a really important cog, the chain that goes around the cog, or whatever mechanical parts, but it can't run without any one of those parts. And that is vitally important that we stand behind them all. Thank you very much for all your comments and for letting us speak here today.
Thank you, Lorraine, for that. And just thank you to Andy and Andrew as well. I think there was really important messages throughout the whole presentation, throughout everybody's contributions to them, and I think that it is really clear that that there is strength in numbers, and that is why unions are so important to us, and so important in terms of getting messages across and fighting for the rights of workers. And I know many people in this meeting, virtually and in the chamber, have been on the picket lines over the last number of weeks as we we have seen our postal workers, our housing executive workers, and our healthcare workers. And I agree with you, Lorraine. My husband's a social worker, so I know in terms of the very important work that goes on there as well. And they have all been out in the picket line too. And I am sure that we will continue to stand with them and stand with the workers. So thank you very much for everybody who contributed to the meeting today. Thank yous for the presentation. I do hope that we do get some resolution. We do need probably massive reform, is right, Andy, of the health service as it stands at the minute. If we don't ensure that we retain staff, I fear for the future, because that is what is wrong. I have seen far too many of my own friends who are workers within the health service in different capacities, moving on to private companies or taking on additional work, and it's just not working for them. So we do need reform, we do need safe staffing levels, we do need adequate pay for people to do their job, and part of that pay has to be proper mileage as well. We can't expect people to run on empty. So thank you everybody for coming along today, either online or in the chamber here. I think that's us for the meeting. So thank yous all, and happy Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.